Stopping by today to help us through this process. I am very appreciative.
Thank you, Gary. It is good to be here with you today and to be able to greet you and just get to know who you are and let you get to know me a little bit too, because one of the things I believe very strongly in is the currency of trust is relationship. And as we grow in trust together and in our work in the kingdom together, that relationship becomes really important. That's good, thank you. I'm tall enough as it is, so if I get a chance to sit down, that's excellent. I want to tell you just a brief account of how I spent yesterday, and I don't do that for any other reason than just to emphasize how important relationships are. As you know, we're at a time in our church, in our district's history, where there are churches that are finding the end of their history as a church in communities. There's a little town down in Central Valley, just north of Bakersfield, that many of you probably don't even know exists. It's a little town called Wasco, California. And used to be the rose capital. Used to be the rose capital of not only California, but I understand the whole United States. So that's a little bit of history about Wasco. One of the things that I got to do was distasteful initially, but it started about 2.5 years ago as meeting with about 5 or 6 depressed and disgruntled saints who were just struggling with the reality of the death of their congregation and wondering what would come out of this. They had lost energy and had lost hope and had lost trust in many ways. I got to show up at that time as a mission exec representing our then district president, Bob Newton, and I came together with an associate pastor from St. John's in Bakersfield who had been sending elders up to help them to conduct worship from time to time as they had been without any pastoral care for a period of time. It was a hard meeting, but also it was a meeting that began to plant a little bit of hope, because sometimes we lose sight of what's next, because when our energy wanes, what have we normally depended upon in our congregations? We haven't depended upon energy from elsewhere. We've depended upon energy from within, right? And yet this is not all that we are as a church, and certainly not all as we are as people of God. Where does our strength come from? It comes from the Lord, doesn't it? And yet so often I am tempted, I'm not going to blame anything upon you, I am tempted to look only within and say, what can I do? I have to tell you a side story on that. I am dependent upon my own strength, my own ability, and so I often have just not depended on others to help me and to assist me. And so yesterday I headed down to Wasco by myself. It was 36 hours after I'd had a vitrectomy. Anybody know what a vitrectomy is? They basically grind out the inside of your eye and take away all of the floaters and replace it with saline solution. Don't ask me why I, at 56 years old, have so much trouble with my vision. But I'm praising God for a miracle of much improved sight just in the last 2 days. But one of the things that I realized is I really needed help from the people around me. So grateful for Pastor Greg Klotz, who went down with me and translated to a group of people that I would not have been able to speak to, because what's happened at Wasco is while the congregation has closed and even the property has not fully been handed over to has not been handed over to the district, we've been able a tentative relationship with a family, a Spanish-speaking family, who worshiped together with the Wasco congregation for about 3 years. And this Spanish-speaking family, get this, came to the United States in 2005. They've already opened up a theological school for people who are Spanish-speaking, who are trying to start churches and Bible studies among Spanish-speaking, largely farm workers and other laborers all over the San Joaquin Valley. And they're doing this on a wing and a prayer. Now, what did my presence down there mean? My presence simply meant that I valued them enough, and Pastor Klotz valued them enough to come down and celebrate with them at the graduation ceremonies they have for these farm workers who are going through theological training, many of them, and missionary training, and are getting it not only from the vantage point of a man who sometimes has listened to a Lutheran sermon, but getting it from the vantage point of a man who is drinking in Lutheran teaching from extension courses and pursuing a master's degree. Now it seems like that's not the traditional way we do things within the LCMS, is it? We normally send people to Concordias and then send people to seminaries, and then they're approved, right? Then they're approved. But these are the opportunities that God is opening, largely just by relationship. Largely just by relationship and the currency of relationship that breeds trust. Breeds trust. Doesn't mean we as the LCMS are sponsoring any of these things at this time. We're just simply walking along as partners and seeing and discovering what God may be doing. What's the next chapter? How might God be opening doors? Now, it's not the same, but it's what I would suggest to you that we're also considering doing here at Calvaryslz, is that we're walking along together in the currency of relationships as we build trust with one another and discovering what doors God may open next. Are you interested in seeing what God may open next here in this neighborhood, in this region, in connection with one another and in groups outside of yourselves? Are you interested in seeing what God might do? Are any of you interested in that? I'm really interested in that. Do I have a special crystal ball, or do any of you that tell us exactly what that will be? No. We are walking by faith and not by sight. We are walking and gazing, and we're looking into a glass in which we see darkly. And we look forward to those things that God will make clear. At least I do. And I know that many of you do as well. And let me tell you, it feels good to all of a sudden have your sight clear up, like happened for me just in the last 48 hours. All of a sudden I don't have a big maze of floaters over here on the right side that I can't see anything. I can't even read well. I'll find myself reading with one eye open. So those are the type of things that we look forward to, of being able to see clearly how God might do that, and yet we still walk as by faith. So one of the things that I wanted to walk through with you is what's been presented to you, I believe, by your chairman, Steve Ellis, and some of you have had a chance to look at this, and I wanted to just take an opportunity to answer questions that may come from you, and to build a little bit of trust by the currency of relationship. Now, let me start by saying in all of this that I don't want to control Calvary. That doesn't work very well.
I can't control it.
I watched you try, they're gentle with you, But yet at the same, God's Spirit controls Calvary. His Word stands at the center of Calvary. I don't want to do that, but I do want to partner as brothers and sisters in the church together with you. And I want to work together with leaders within our church in this region to see how we might not just simply be congregations standing alone, but congregations standing together as the kingdom. So, what I'd like to do is just outline Steve's action plan that we talked about and give you a little bit of clarification on that. Steve has written out for me and shared several actions, and one was to form a call committee. You heard about that this morning. And the call committee is really because this is Calvary's call. This is Calvary's call. It means that you together take ownership for that, and you do it supported by others, prayerfully, relationally, and certainly by attention and partnership that will come from people like Aaron Putnam, that will come from people like myself, that will come from people in a neighboring congregation at Good Shepherd like Dalit Boger. Okay? It will come from those people. There will be intentional partnership. Pastor Sauer, who is our circuit visitor, will be part of that intentional partnership. So forming a call committee, and that's happening immediately. So it sounds like last Sunday, Steve presented a pastoral profile and strategic partnership to the congregation, and he's got it below, and I'm going to walk through that with you here in a moment. And then he is asking, and you are asking, that if there are any names that you as a congregation would feel would fit this profile, that you would nominate those names. And I just want to walk through that profile today with you because I want you to be able to prayerfully consider, is that just a person I know, or do they fit that profile? And I want to tell you something. If you have a name that you know that you think might fit, throw it out there anyway. Because I will take a good look at those profiles together with the assistance of others and give you an answer back saying, yeah, this does fit this profile, or it doesn't, or it kind of does, and this is why. We want to look at your ideas, what God raises up from within your heart, how the Spirit has moved within this congregation, because there's ownership here. And I value God's Spirit moving on each of you as well. So that congregation will give names of potential candidates. That'll happen by September 9th. And then you need to receive lists of names back from the district office. Steve left that date blank, so I had to look hard at my calendar this morning and say, when can I realistically get those names back to you? I'm working on that list right now just from names that I know and doing a little bit of work on that. But I also looked at my travel schedule and my work schedule, so I am going to say I can get that back to you by September 21st. That does not give the call committee a whole lot of time, but it'll be in their hands prior to their meeting on the 23rd, and will be able to be distributed. We'll get it back to you by the 21st, okay? The call committee will meet and look at those candidates together on September 23rd and following, and there will be a congregational voters meeting announced that Sunday and the following Sunday, so that by October 7th, God willing, there would be able to be a call. It's a little bit of a tight timeline. I'm going to freely acknowledge that. I'm going to let you know that from my vantage point, with the assistance of the staff that I have, and as I'm on a little bit of a learning curve, I'm actually going to be asking President Newton for a little bit of help on this as well, saying, talk to me, Bob. I've only got a couple of call lists. Help me to learn a little bit from what you know and what you've done in the past. So I am hopeful that you will be able to have a call meeting by October 7th. Now let's talk a little bit for a moment about Calvary's pastoral profile that we are suggesting. And what I want to do now is I want to stop and say, back up, I need to stop for a minute. Are there any questions you have about the timeline that I've given so far? Yes.
I just wanted to say one thing is, if we get the names from you on September 21st, we can push that timeline back. That initial one was just kind of an estimate to go through, so there's nothing hard and fast about October 7th that...
I just wanted to try to honor that, Steve. We've been, while it's a fairly quick timeline, at the same time, I just wanted to do my best to work along with you. And we can work things out from that vantage point. So if I can get some names to you earlier so that you can start your review, I can do that. And there may be some names coming later. So I'm not looking at a lot of names, not like 10 or 12 names, trying to kind of point you towards no less than 3 and probably no more than 5 or 6 names. But 3 names are my minimum that I'd like to put before you. Yes. See a hand up there? Nope. Just working on your circulation, huh? Okay. Yeah, I do that too. Any other questions about timeline? Yeah.
Are you saying that right now you don't have a specific person you're interested in for this?
I have a specific person and a second person who is very well known by me. I'm not sure of the suitability of him for the call list right now. I'm investigating that. But yes, I do have an individual in mind, but there's no guarantees on that. He and I have been in conversation. He's actually been in conversation with Pastor Beaupre as well. So there is somebody in mind, but there's no guarantees because this is a call, it's not an assignment.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm not saying I don't have anybody in mind. I've been prayerfully considering this and talking about this for at least 2 months. But yet at the same time, I also recognize the importance of your congregational participation. And I don't want to short circuit it. I don't want to be, while I will take the risk of seeming to be controlling, I don't want to control. In other words, I don't want to leave you out there hanging and say, well, here's some names, but I don't have anything to do with that. I want to partner along with you, and I'll take the risk of someone feeling like, well, President Lange was a little bit too directive. I would rather be hands-on and be accused of messing with you than be hands-off and have you say, well, you don't care. Does that make sense? My shoulders are not as broad as my son's, but this is about God. It's not about me, so I'm pretty comfortable. Any other questions? Let's talk about the pastoral profile a little bit. And I'm going to stop after I read a couple of these and make sure that you have an idea of what that means, okay? Because as you are prayerfully considering names that you might know of, these are important things to have clear in your mind what we're talking about here. And also you can ask, why is that part of this pastoral profile? Okay? So number 1, a history of developing leaders. And in other words, the idea that it's not just about them doing the work, but it's also about them pouring into others to equip them to do the work. And that's not trying to if you will, dismiss themselves from the responsibilities of pastoral leadership, but rather to multiply themselves in their influence. So we want to see somebody who has a history of doing that, a history of developing leaders, and then a history of discipleship. And what I mean by that is both a history of following Jesus and his lead, and also intentionally, with the emphasis on intentionally making other followers of Jesus as well by the grace of God. Okay, those are two things that fit together. Any questions about that? Clarification. This is, as you know, this is not just about those who are presently here at Calvary. It's also about those that God will bring, right? We want to, and we say, who are those people? I haven't identified them yet, but I'm choosing to believe that God is not done. And so that means He desires to bring and to shape others as well. An ability to lead from the middle. I'm sorry, this is a Mike Langeism, okay? There are those who lead from the front and say, follow me! There are those that lead from the rear, kind of invisible, and every once in a while they're kind of like that border collie sheepdog nipping at your heels to keep you moving. And there are those that lead from the middle, okay? And kind of do and walk along in life with you, experience with you, let others lead sometimes, and sometimes they slip to the back and play sweeper, make sure that everyone's keeping up, but they lead from the middle. They know the people in the midst of them. So leading from the middle is a really important concept. What does that mean? Doesn't need to be in front all the time. Is willing to raise up others and say, you know what, take the lead here. Has a focus on empowering others in leadership. Excited about urban, multi-ethnic ministry, leading from the middle or from the side. They are flexible. Flexible. In working with people from other backgrounds, denominational and or outside of the Christian faith. They're flexible on their viewpoints on theological education. They don't see that it only has to happen through Concordias. It might start before Concordia and lead to that, or lead to some other flexible way of raising up leaders. They also show that flexibility in their pastoral cares, even in their practice of communion. They're not rigid with their practice of communion, but they exercise responsible pastoral care. That's just a demonstrative thing. And I would add one more thing that wasn't on this list. They're comfortable working with the priesthood. Who are the priesthood? Yeah. They're comfortable working with the priesthood. I have to tell you, I have a great heart for God's priests. I believe in the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod we have underdeveloped and underutilized our priesthood. And we sometimes have relegated them to a place that does not allow them to, or give them permission to lead and be the disciples and the disciple makers of Christ out in their neighborhoods. I don't believe the priesthood's work is done simply by saying, oh, we have lay readers. We have lay communion assistants. That's assistants in the temple. But the priesthood do their best work out in their neighborhoods and communities, as they are the go-between for others. So this person needs to really have a heart and a desire to develop and give permission to the priesthood. Any questions about what that means, that ability to lead from the middle and be flexible? Yes?
We talk about flexibility with communion, and I know back to several conventions, there's a kind of broad spectrum of how communion is viewed. Some of it's, like our other Trinitarian believers, it's symbolic. We take it literally, and then there's others that, we've got all the different kind of ways of looking at communion.
Yep.
And when you say flexibility,
I'm not talking about open communion.
yeah,
Okay? And Steve was really good in his profile to write down that we're not talking about open communion. We're talking about a close fellowship of communion and standing up clearly for who we are and what we stand for. but also not being rigid in the way that we exercise pastoral care for those who may come to the table and have need of it. That we don't start with saying, we've got several traffic cops around here, you need to get past them. We start with recognizing the desire and the trust and the relationship that God wants to build with his people. Okay, does that make sense?
Yes.
So an emphasis on a close fellowship rather than rigidly closed. Okay, there are words that we use to describe it. I just simply am suggesting that yes, we value our confession as Lutheran Christians. We value that, we stand for it, we confess it. We don't use it as a club. Okay? Does that make sense? If you got a question or concern, please speak with me either here or privately. A couple of other things. We're looking for somebody who is, and this is a phrase we got from a gentleman right out here. We met at a grocery store not far from here and had coffee together. This was Pastor Putnam and I. And we were talking about a way to talk about the leadership of this person. And we were saying patient and humble. And a guy who was listening into our conversation, he says, "Oh, you mean patient and humble yet assertive?" I said, "Yeah, that's it." And he was listening in. He says, "That's the kind of people I'm looking for in my business all the time. They need to be patient and humble, and yet at the same time, when it's time to take action, they need to take action." Okay? So we're looking for someone who has those abilities. That takes courage, doesn't it? You're humble. You know who you are and who you aren't, and yet you have the courage to take a stand. A collaborator, a team player, not just a leader who leads alone, but a collaborator, somebody who has the ability to say, "I didn't understand it that way before. Thank you for helping me to see it from a different viewpoint," and is able to assimilate that and recognize the good ideas and the growth of other people. Recognizing where Calvary has been, pastor's ability to be a healing presence and an influence is important too. There need to be some shepherd qualities in this individual. Some shepherd qualities. I like to talk about who Jesus is as our shepherd king. Our shepherd king. It means he is a servant, humble, and yet he is our king. I think our under shepherds want to model who our good shepherd is. They need to be shepherd servants of the king. Okay? And so that means that they show some of those qualities of our shepherd king. Discernment is important, and then finally, not a new candidate unless they can't come from a prior life and church leadership experience. I'm not looking for a new candidate at this time. We thought that we might have one from our graduating class that would fit, and as we looked a little closer, we recognized that even though he was about my age and youthful, more youthful than I am, his eyes were better anyway. Even though we were looking for somebody who's about my age, he was still very young in pastoral ministry and idealistic. So we need some people that have been tested. I often say, I'm looking for somebody who's suffered a little bit. Does that make sense? And I think, those who have suffered and been through it are an important element. I share these things with you today because I really value the partnership we have together as God moves you to call your next pastor, who will not just be for the silo ministry of Calvary, but will be about the greater kingdom ministry in this corner of the Bay Area of California and beyond. That's the goal, is that we recognize that The days are past when we can just look next door and say, hey, look what Good Shepherd's doing over there. Okay, we celebrate that, but we're really about what Calvary's doing. And looking more along the lines of, who are we together in this region? What is God calling us to do? Because God has trusted us with a lot. This is just an amazing place to live, isn't it? It's frightening too. You know, all the changes that are coming and all of the people groups that are here and also, not to speak of the politics that keep on moving all over the place and kind of leave us a little bit quivering too. But, you know, God must, as President Newton said to me and many of you many times, God must really trust us to leave us here at this time in this place. I don't think he's abandoned us. I think he trusts us. And one of the currencies of trust is relationship. The time that we spend. I'll give you a little bit of a close. You know that little church down in Wasco? As a mission exec and now district president, I haven't thrown a lot of money, of the district's money at that project. I have thrown a lot of attention and love and time down there. I really believe that in your ministry here that God is entrusting you with and entrusted us with together, it's not always just about money. It's about care and prayers and time and a genuine desire to get to know opportunities and people different than ourselves. And that takes a little bit of patience. And sometimes it takes a little bit of gritting of teeth as we get past stuff. Any questions that you have for me? I'm either going to assume that means that we're on the same page together, or I'll get a flurry of emails in the next week. If you do have any questions, please communicate with your leaders, and they will communicate directly with me. That really works well. You know, if you've got a question that you want to focus through, communicate with your leaders. That way I'm not trying to, or Rita's not trying to chase down a whole bunch of people. But yeah, we do want to continue to say, what does God have in mind for all of us together? Okay? Anything to add, Steve, or I know Jeff, you've done a little bit of work on this as well. Anything to add that I'm missing?
Just if anybody has not gotten a copy of the profile that he went over, and then there's a little bit of information about kind of what work they'll be doing at Calvary and the work they'll be doing for District Link. There'll be copies of this on the long table in the narthex.
Yeah, remain prayerful, please. Continue to bring your intercession before the throne of grace. I don't mean that just simply by speaking those words. We're going to close our time together by doing that all together. And I hope that is a way that God speaks to you, and remain hopeful. I have a former, one of my mentors is one of the priesthood. How many of you know Frank Spiva? He used to do some work out of our district office, and he was a layperson and helped people plan wills and trusts and things like that, and just to continue the Lord's work. And so Frank was a guy that I got to know really well. He's in his mid-80s now, in retirement in Colorado. And Frank used to say to me two things that I treasure. One is that, Michael, ministry happens in the interruptions. He said, pray for interruptions. I thought, Frank, that's a crazy thing to say. Pray for the interruptions. The other thing that he said is, he said, I choose to live my life with my hands open. Because if my hands are closed, I'm not ready for the blessings that God has intended to flow to me and through me. Says, so I don't close my hands tightly upon his blessings. I leave them open so they flow to me and May God do that with all of us as well. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thanks so much for your time together with your people here at Calvary. What a blessing it is to work together with them and to grow in a way that you would lead. I ask, Lord, that you would direct us to the man that you have in mind for leadership here at Calvary, that would also be a participant in the leadership in this region, and would lead with us through that region. Lord, I ask that you would also begin to identify people that you have in mind that might be connected to this leadership and to Calvary by extension, and that might be built up and grow. Lord, if you have in mind the possibility of raising up new leaders or new churches, we ask that you would do so. If you have in mind to utilize the abilities and the gifts of people here at Calvary, I ask that you would help them to recognize who they are and what they have to contribute, and how they might continue to function in building the kingdom. Lord, direct our eyes to people that we would not normally think of as belonging at Calvary or belonging in the kingdom, and help us to have open eyes, not judging eyes, but grace-filled eyes for what you intend. Thank you for the grace that comes to each of us. Lord, we ask that you would continue to bless the ministries of Lange as well, and Pastor Putnam. We thank you for Paul Lawaki, who is a Lange missionary and the leader of School of Young Leaders. Lord, we thank you for the week that he just spent in St. Louis as he was orienting to a course of seminary study so that he could grow up in what it means to be a leader in your church and in your work. Thank you for the way that you have shaped him already, and we pray that you would shape him in the months and the years to come, so that many more people might be connected to faith and to life and to eternity with you, and be set free to do the same with others. We say this in Jesus' name.